guys, it's Sarah and I'm eating pizza and I'm going to do a wrap up for you guys. Hope that sounds good. I've yet to do any sort of wrap up for you guys, so I decided that I'm gonna do myself a massive wrap up where I describe all the books that I've read since January, and I'm calling this my spring wrap up, even though it includes a lot of winter. And just so you guys know, I don't have a copy of these books because I'm very cheap and I don't buy books. I go to the public library. Because, as Arthur always likes to say, so starting out, the first book that I read this year was The Diviners by Libba Bray. This book was probably my favorite book that I've read all year so far. It is set in 1920s New York, and it's about a girl named Evie who has been kind of kicked out of her hometown and sent to live with her uncle in New York City. And her uncle is obsessed with the occult, and Evie has a secret where she actually has a supernatural ability, and it's sort of like a murder mystery. But I think my favorite part was that it was set in the 1920s, and you could totally tell that Libba Bray did so much research about the 1920s. You really feel as though you're in the 1920s. It has all the fun things like flappers and speakeasies and prohibition and all that jazz, including jazz. It does have jazz. I absolutely loved it, and I would recommend it to anyone to read. So following that, I read the Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. Funny thing about me reading that is I actually had no idea that it had anything to do with the Mortal Instruments, but I decided at my public library that it seemed like a decent book, and so I picked up A Clockwork Angel, which is the first book in the series, and I brought it home. And mind you, my library for some reason did not have the beautiful covers that everyone is used to. It had the jankiest cover that I've ever seen in my life, but for some reason I thought I'll give it a try, and I brought it home. And when I was reading the first chapter, I literally thought to myself, this reminds me of that movie I saw with Lily Collins in it. Later, come to find out, it's the prequel series to what that movie was based on. I would have to say this is one of my favorite book series that I've ever read. I thought the characters were done so well. I loved that it was set in Victorian England and that it had like a steampunk vibe. Beyond that, all I have to say is Will Herondale. Following that, I read the Grisha Trilogy by Leigh Bardugo. Again, I just picked this up by chance at the library. I feel like I was on a roll. I was just picking up random things and they ended up being really great, and then come to find out everyone on BookTube loves them. I thought these books had beautiful writing, and I thought the story was so different. My favorite thing about it was that even though it was in an alternate world, Leigh Bardugo chose to have Russian influences, so all the language and all the places and all the customs kind of have like a Russian vibe to them, which I thought was really unique and kind of a cool idea. The only thing I'll say is I didn't like Mal, which is unfortunate because he's the main character, Lena's love interest. I really tried to like him. He was kind of funny, but I just didn't like his relationship with Lena. My favorite character was Nikolai Lansop, who is the prince in the story. He was hilarious. He had the best lines in the whole book, and I actually secretly wanted Alina to end up with him, but unfortunately she didn't. Was that a spoiler? Sorry. Hopefully you've read them and I didn't just spoil you. Don't kill me. After that, I read The Elite by Kiera Cass. So The Elite is the sequel to The Selection, which I think is a trilogy, and basically it's set in like a dystopian world, and there's like caste systems almost, and then you're divided by that, whatever, and the prince has to choose a bride, so they're having this competition. It's kind of like The Bachelor or something, and so they choose girls from all the different castes, and then they go and they compete. And so the second book, a lot of girls have been eliminated, and then the main character, who is named America, is still in the running, and the prince really likes her, and blah blah blah. I didn't really love this book, which is unfortunate. I actually hadn't really liked the first one that much, but I thought I should probably read the sequel. So I did, and I just thought it was kind of frivolous. I liked the idea of it being sort of like The Bachelor, but I didn't like how it was done. I just thought America was kind of shallow. Like, there is a very, very cliche love triangle in this book series, and the whole book she was just like, do I like my old boyfriend or do I like the prince? I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. Then I read A Great and Terrible Beauty by Libbre. Because I loved The Diviners so much, I was like, I need to get my hands on every book that Libre's ever read, and so I started with A Great and Terrible Beauty, which kind of let me down. And it's set in 19th century, and it centers around a girl named Gemma who has grown up in India most of her life, but is now being sent to boarding school in England. I thought the beginning was very promising because the first scenes are in India and they were so descriptive. I have actually had the opportunity to go to India once before, and I thought Libbre did an amazing job capturing it. It really made me feel like I was back in India. She described it very well. But then when Gemma went to England, it was not as good. I found Gemma as the main character to be very frivolous. I'm saying frivolous a lot in this video, aren't I? And not extremely intelligent. It was literally as if she had no common sense at all. She was constantly making super unwise decisions, and not even in a way where like the main character just makes a decision and you're like, oh, you probably shouldn't have done that. It was like, are you serious? I felt like I was watching one of those horror movies where you're yelling at the screen telling the girl, don't go into the basement, stop, why are you doing that, you're so dumb. And every decision that Gemma made, I felt that way. So I was a little disappointed because I love Libbre a lot and I do want to read more books by her, but this one was just kind of a miss for me, which was sad. Moving on, I also read White Cat by Holly Black. So White Cat is sort of an alternate world where there are people who are called workers who have different supernatural, magical abilities. And it's about a boy named Castle who is from a family of workers, but for some reason he has no abilities, and so he kind of spends the book trying to figure out why that is. I spent most of this book being confused. Because it's an alternate world, Holly Black needed to explain it, so the book was very slow, and because it would be like we were in the plot and things would be happening and you'd be confused because you didn't understand the world, and then she'd take a break to describe the world and why it was and what workers were and all that, and she just didn't do a great job explaining the magic system. I just didn't really understand it. It made me feel as though I had missed some sort of prequel book. So then I read Dark Life by Kat Falls. I actually did do a review on this book, so if you want to see that, I'll put a link in the description. It's sort of a Wild West sci-fi dystopian book, if you will, and I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a very quick read, it's not very long, it's a middle grade book, so it's also an easy read, and if you want to know more about the plot, you can watch my review. So I definitely recommend giving it a try if you just want a quick, fun, easy read. You don't really expect much in the way of like depth or anything, unless you mean depth as in the ocean. After that, I read The Eternal Ones by Kirsten Miller. It centers around a girl named Haven who has grown up in a very religious small town in Tennessee. Her whole life she has had visions and dreamt about a guy named Ethan. Because of this, everyone in her religious town thinks that she's possessed by a demon. I didn't really like this book at all. I thought the romance was rushed, and honestly, the characters were very angry. Almost every section of dialogue, the characters were being really sassy and yelling at each other. I was honestly like, guys, can we just chill out for a second? Like, you don't need to be so angry at each other, please. And the last book I read this spring was Noggin by John Corey Whaley. It's about a boy named Travis who, prior to the book, has died of cancer, but now 5 years later, because of science, his head was able to be frozen and now he's been reattached to a new body and woken up into his life. But unfortunately, everyone he knows has aged 5 years while he is still 17. I really wanted to like this book, but I just couldn't. I didn't like Travis, the main character. It's almost entirely just Travis wishing his life could be the way it was before, even though everyone else has aged, and he just complains a lot. And there's not much plot, so I didn't really like this book, to be honest. So basically that's it. That's all the books I read this spring. I hope you enjoyed watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books or if you want to read any of these books. Yeah, that would be cool. Okay, bye.